Back on? Yeah. How much are you boosting it, the guitar? Like, like what? How much? Okay. Well, let me turn the problem is the monitors are really loud now, so let me turn those down, and then I can send you more. I just got to be careful. Why does the gain affect that? I mean, because well, the reason that it was set low is because I was sending a line level signal, meaning it's much more hot, so you don't need to boost the gain. But I didn't know that that would affect the stream. Okay, so how's that? Good. I really meant to go back to DI because I probably turned the gain down. I've done it before, but that should be more typical of a DI. What? What is? Because the monitors? Okay, so their monitors are off now. Monitors are totally off. Can Okay, can you hear the guitar now? Good morning. All right, everybody, raise your hand if all your cylinders are firing. Good, then I'm with you. There it is. Diamond light, black diamond light, leads the breath near the waters falling high. Patiently, violently, continents go slowly out to sea. I wanted to go home, but I don't know how. I wanted to go home to feel the living light all around. Just a turn, just a step down the gravel lane so far away. Where to go, what to pay, seed of the lion sky on the willow way. I wanted to go home, but I don't know how. I wanted to go home to feel the living light all around. Red and green, violet, gold, see the breathing sun and the rainbows, reaching out, touching in. There's a candle in the window glowing thin. I wanted to go home, but I don't know how. I wanted to go home, feel the living light all around, feel the living light all around, feel the living light all around. Thank you. All right, we're going to do something a little different. We've been focusing on mental health, and I was thinking about it this week, and I thought, I was fortunate, many of us probably, well, in fact, I can share, we're fortunate to grow up with this song, and it always occupied a special kind of mystical place inside me. And we're going to play it instrumentally, but it's written by Brian Wilson and Gary Usher. The Beach Boys played. And there's a place where I can go and tell my secrets to in my room. In my room. In this world, I'll lock out all my worries and my fears in my room. In my room. Do my dreaming and my scheming, lie awake and pray. Do my crying and my sighing, laugh at yesterday. Now it's dark and I'm alone, but I won't be afraid. In my room. In my room. Thanks.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Congregational Church of Ann Arbor. Thanks for joining us for worship this morning. Also, welcome to those joining us online. Please feel free to share the link and share with friends and family. We have, not every week, but I think the friendship pads are out on the tables this morning. Feel free to sign those. If I'm seeing somebody say, no, those are not the friendship pads. There are some cards. Darcy's holding up an example. We have these things on some of the tables. Feel free to fill these out. We have a few really good announcements this morning. One is that after the 10 a.m. service, there will be a Contemporary Issues Committee second Sunday presentation in this hall on the mental health crisis and how it affects policing. And so That'll be a great conversation. We hope you can attend. We also have some great upcoming music events. For example, we have Lift Us Up, a Black History Month celebration concert this Friday at 6:30 in the sanctuary. Our director of music, Benjamin, and Brian, also director of the chancel choir, will be conducting the chancel choirs of FCC and FUMC and chamber orchestra. Saturday is our first day of music in the Black church. There will be workshops and a catered lunch. The day will begin at 9 and end at 5. Lastly, on music, on Sunday there will be a concert by the there are musical terms and words I do not know, but there will be a chorale from Detroit and Our Own Thing Chorale, and this is going to be an exciting concert starting at 4 o'clock on Sunday. On a different note, there will be a sign-up for the warming shelter that's still ongoing. You can donate food and supplies or volunteer your time helping out. The links are available both on the website and in the weekly emails. The dates of the warming shelter are Monday through Friday, February 19th to the 23rd, and also February 26th through March 1st. Lastly, family camp is coming up already. It's hard to think of May when it's still in February, but sometimes the warm weather feels like it's getting to May already. But family camp is May 17th through 19th, and RSVPs can be sent to the office email, office@fccandarbor.org. As we shift from announcements to worship, let's take a moment in the spirit of prayer. Dear God, divine source of compassion, we create the sacred space together, and in it we find the quiet spaces of our hearts. We gather together today seeking solace and understanding amidst the complexities of our lives. We come together as a community, acknowledging the sacredness of each individual journey and recognizing the interconnectedness of our experiences. On this day, we lift up those among us and how we are as a community when we know that struggles with and the burdens of mental health challenges are real. We hold in our thoughts and prayers those who feel the weight of anxiety, depression, or other conditions that can cloud in different ways and create suffering. May we all find the strength to face each day with courage and resilience, knowing that none of us are alone in any struggles of the community. We also remember and lift up those who care for loved ones dealing with mental illness, offering them support and compassion in their role as caregivers. Grant them and us patience and understanding and help to find moments of rest and renewal amidst a life full of so many responsibilities. As we reflect on the complexity of mental illness, let us remember that healing comes in many forms. May we create a community where individuals feel safe to share their experiences without fear of judgment, and where support and acceptance abound. Guide us, O God, as we strive to be agents of kindness and understanding and your healing in the world. Help us to break down the stigma surrounding mental illness and create a society where all are valued and supported and all of our journeys lead towards wholeness. In the sacred moment of reflection, may we find comfort in the knowledge that we are held in the embrace of a love that transcends all boundaries. May we draw strength from the connections we share as members of this beloved community. Amen.
church. My voice is not great today, but I feel better than I sound. Also, still love sympathy, so that works out. We're going to start with Psalm 77, and we're going to read just 9 verses of it. It's more of a downer psalm. They call them Psalms of Lament. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about, it's just a 2-week series, so today's focused on how we love people that are affected by mental illness and what we can do. So it's kind of a practical one, but we'll start with Psalm 77. I cry aloud to God that he may hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. I think of God and I moan, I meditate. My spirit faints. You keep my eyelids from closing. I'm so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old and remember the years of long ago. I commune with my heart in the night. I meditate and search my spirit. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Am I reading the wrong version? I'm so sorry, Jared. I'm going to read from there. Has his unfailing love vanished forever, and has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? We'll start in prayer. God, for the times that we have prayed this, felt like this, could echo the same words of this psalmist, we thank you for meeting us exactly where we're at and hearing our prayer and hearing our cries. And we pray that in this time together we can open up our hearts and learn new ways to love those who are suffering. Amen. A couple years ago, my phone lit up with a text from my running partner, and she said, "I'm not okay. Can you talk?" So I went and met her. I pulled up in the parking lot of Barry's Bagels, actually, and climbed in her front seat, and she was a wreck. She was just bawling. She was asking those questions through tears and kind of questions that she was yelling into the car, like, what am I supposed to do? Why hasn't everybody had an answer to this? Why can no one tell me what I'm supposed to do right now? She unloaded maybe 4 ounces of the thousands of pounds that were on her heart. She had this son who was, I think, a senior in high school at the time, and he was going through the process of getting a diagnosis. His behavior was really erratic. He was a danger to himself, and he was scary to others. And she only had 10 minutes to unload this because she had to get to work. She had another younger child. She had a family to hold together. I mean, loving someone who struggles with mental health is hard work. I got back in my car feeling all sorts of helpless and headed to church. I mean, the least I could do was pray for her and for her kid. That moment in Barry's Bagels parking lot was probably 2.5, 3 years ago. Yesterday I met her for a run, and her son is stable, not living the future she had imagined for him when he was a senior in high school, but her life is less chaotic in this moment than it was 3 years ago. So today we're gonna talk about how to love your neighbor who is caring for or someone who is just affected by mental illness, because when Jesus gave us the commandment, the greatest commandment, which was to love God and love our neighbor, we have to follow it. It's an act of faith. And as Lily shared last week, 1 of 5 people are affected by mental illness. So when God tells us to love our neighbor, that means we have to love more than just the 80% of them. We have to love all of our neighbors as an act of faith. And how we do that, I want to offer 2 practical ways, and then we're going to talk about what the role is of faith in the church and how the church can help. But first, the 2 practical ways. The first one is by awareness and education. And while we might know a little bit, we can always learn more. And I think one thing that makes a huge difference is language. And so in that interview we had with Colleen Creel, she talks a little bit about the importance of language.
I think the language that we use when we talk to our kids or to each other has to be very intentional. So, for example, if someone says, I'm really going through a hard time right now, I can't seem to function, I can't get out of bed, the last thing you probably want to say to them is, oh, it'll pass, you'll be fine, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, work harder. I see that with a lot of athletes. Just work harder, you can work through it. You know, we want to be able to listen to these people and hear that, you know, I'm sorry, how can I help? How long has this been going on?
So learning how to respond and what kinds of questions to ask will enable us to be better friends. It'll enable us to support better as an act of faith. Because it's hard to love your neighbor when you can't understand them. It's hard to love your neighbor when you don't have the right language. I think part of increasing our awareness in our education is helping to erase this stigma. Your friend might feel like they're the only ones going through it. Social media doesn't help. Everybody's got these beautiful pictures of their families on families' vacations, and that friend I was talking about, she's like, well, we can't take those anymore. If we do, we're gonna have to move heaven and earth to try to have the experiences like I'm seeing online. She feels like she's living a private nightmare, but she's not alone. I think folks feel like they're alone because of this stigma. Stigma means we talk less about it. Maybe we talk less out of fear of judgment. Maybe we talk less because we want to protect the confidentiality of our loved one and their privacy. Maybe we don't talk about it because we lack the language or we lack the experiments. But stigma delights in silencing people. That's where it gets its power from. So to be loving neighbors, we've got to break that silence. I think the stigma extends to medication too. Colleen said something about it with athletes. Athletes are particularly hard because in their experience, if we just work harder, if we do more workouts, if we do more strength training, we will power through it. There is no CrossFit champion in the world of mental health. It does not work like that. You don't just power through it. It is science. There are neurons and chemistry, and it needs balancing. It doesn't need more strength training or power throughing. So if you don't know what to say to folks who are struggling with the stigma, sometimes the best thing is to not say anything at all and ask more questions. It's better to ask what someone needs rather than assume you already know. So that's the first thing, is education awareness, right? It's going to require a humility and a curiosity from us. And if we come with that humility and curiosity, I think we come ready to equip ourselves to best love and support our neighbor. We learn. And after we learn, we speak up, and stigma becomes less powerful. And in that, our loved ones feel more well loved. And the second way I think that we can love someone affected by mental illness is by boundaries. One of my favorite movies is Love Actually. Any other Love Actually fans out here? Yes? Okay. Love it. We always watch it at Christmas, which is funny because if you think about it, all of these stories don't hold up the kind of ideal of love, right? There's like the Emma Thompson family, that's Karen, and her husband Harry, and their perfectly beautiful family, except that Harry is having an affair with his secretary. And then there's a storyline of the prime minister, played by the ever-charming Hugh Grant, who falls in love with one of his staffers, and it's complicated, right? He's the prime minister, so his love is complicated, and the relationship is. And there's the grieving Daniel, who's played by Liam Neeson, and he's raising his stepson, Sam, who in this movie is not being kidnapped or taken, but just as dangerously, he is falling in love. And so he's trying to work through that. And then, actually, this is the point. The point of my sermon is this couple, which is Sarah, the one who works late all the time and struggles to find love. And she is caring for her brother, who is in a mental care facility because he cannot live outside of the facility. And she's a devoted sister. She was handed the role of caregiving through, I don't know, the death of her parents or something, but she's it. She's who her brother calls. And if she doesn't show up when he calls, what is her fear? He might not calm down. He might not be okay, or worse, he might not know how much I love him. So every time Michael calls, Sarah drops what she's doing and runs to his side. And in the movie, she's unable to develop relationships outside of those because of this boundary issue. She has similar boundary issues at work. She's the last one to leave the office every night, working long hours, interrupted only by these calls from her brother. Boundaries are hard. They're really hard for people who are pleasers, who are helpers, who are peacemakers. They're hard for people who want to make everyone happy and hate disappointing people. If that or all of those describe you, you've probably struggled with setting boundaries too, right? We want to be nice. We want to be accommodating. We say things like, but they need me. But they have no one else. But it's my job. I feel like I can't say no. Those things all may be true in and of themselves. But let me offer some other true statements. You are only one person. Saying no to someone isn't the same as saying, I don't love you. And whenever you say yes to something or someone, you are saying no to something or someone else. When we love someone struggling with mental health, chances are their illness has made it difficult for them to recognize and respect and practice healthy boundaries. That is a symptom of their disorder. As the person loving and supporting them, we need to set and hold boundaries, whatever those might look like, and I can't tell you what they look like for you. But we can't exist in a world trying to pour from an empty vessel, because I promise you those pools of need are always going to be thirsty. But boundaries help us refill our tanks. Boundaries help us love for the long haul. And boundaries are biblical. We're talking about this in chapel last week. There's this part of the Gospels where Jesus is first beginning his ministry, and he's healing all these people. And he's in one town, and there's this long line of people waiting to be healed, and he finally turns it in for the night. And he gets up early in the morning and goes out, and the disciples wake up, and they can't find him. They're like, are you kidding me, Jesus? You're like 2 hours late for your first appointment. You're 50 emails behind. Like, what are you doing? So they go find him, and he's off by himself praying. And they ask him, they're like, well, what? There are people waiting for you. And Jesus said, I know, and I can't, because I have to go spread this message to the neighboring towns. I have to say no to this village and these people so I can go say yes to my greater calling. Jesus modeled what it was to have boundaries and how important it was. It's two very practical and I believe faithful things we can do when we're loving and supporting someone. Increase our awareness and education and be willing to set and practice those healthy boundaries. Yes? Two? Okay, we're going to move now to the church and faith and how those two can play a role in how we love others. Because since the beginning of history of God and God's people, we've been struggling with despair and hopelessness. As the psalmist said, those were our ancestors. They have been struggling with the same things we have. And time again, God has sent prophets, and these prophets have spoken words of hope. Isaiah is one of my favorites. He says, do not fear, for I will be with you. The waves shall not consume you. Those are such words of a metaphor. If you feel like you're drowning, if you need to go in your room like that Beach Boys song, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're just going to be overcome or consumed by these waves. And God sent prophets to speak right into that experience. The psalmist, Psalm 34, tells us the Lord is near the brokenhearted. The Lord saves those crushed in spirit. These are not physical maladies. This is a God who understands exactly what it means to feel the weight of mental health. The one that I think best describes the care that God shows is spoken through Jesus in the Gospels. And that's one you probably know well. It's from Matthew 11. Jesus tells us, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in hearts, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Do you hear what Jesus promises and doesn't promise in those statements? First of all, he identifies himself as gentle and humble in heart, not powerful and demanding of piety. He promises rest for our souls, not solutions to our problems. And nowhere in those verses are we promised protection from suffering, but we are promised rest. And we are offered a Lord who will help carry some of the burdens for us and with us. And it leads us to another way our faith guides us in our efforts to love those who are affected by mental illness. And that's theology. How we speak about God is not just for pastors, it's not just for people in seminaries or graduate schools, because developed theology can guide someone through their pain, and unquestioned theology can exacerbate the pain. So if you believe, because somebody told you or you grew up believing this, that suffering comes to those who deserve it, that it's going to be really difficult to love someone who's suffering, because underneath it all, you're going to have this hint of blame in it. Somehow they brought this upon themselves. They should be able to bring themselves out of it. How we think about God absolutely informs how we're able to love our neighbor. If, however, we accept in our developed theology that bad things can happen to really good people, and if we believe that God is in the business not of punishing the imperfect, but of loving the imperfect, then we have an entirely different outlook on how we love our neighbor, because how we think and how we talk about God matters deeply. So it is vital that we develop that language, we develop our theology. And the way we develop it is through questioning it. It's through reading scripture that's hard and maybe even makes us question what we believed before. We develop our nature, or we develop our theology in how we question God's nature and how we have experiences in our life, and we bring them back to church and we bring them to small groups and say, where was God in this? Or why did this happen? Asking those hard questions is exactly how we develop it. And I'm preaching the choir here because you're here, you're willing to develop it, you're asking those questions. But keep that up, because theology informs how we love others. In the interview I did with Colleen, I asked her, how do you think the church can help? And she had some great suggestions, and I'll let you hear from her now.
Church has a big role. Church has a big role. The church in general, to me, is just a safe place. And in some people's lives, there's not a lot of those. And so I think that's a great thing to remember, that this is a very safe, welcoming community. Also, I think that the individuals, because when you're talking about your mental health, it's so personal. And so the relationships that people have here can really help if they're healing or if they're suffering. If they need healing, if they're suffering. For example, I would say if you are in the choir and you have your friends in the choir and someone's not coming, or you notice someone is not really their usual behavior, or you text or call and they're not responding, I would hope that you would go that extra step and go to their home or try to ask them, hey, is everything okay?
I have heard you all do this before. Actually, somebody just did it last week, and they pulled me aside and they're like, I haven't heard or seen so-and-so in worship in a couple weeks, and that's strange for them. I'm just worried about them. I'm going to call and check in. Would you call and check in? Lily and Eric and I love that stuff. That is the church being its best. Keep that up. If we ever call you on the phone and we're like, hey, we just haven't seen you, trust me, we are not worried about your worship attendance. We are worried about you as a person. We're checking in because we love and care about you, and probably because one of your other church members have told us, hey, I haven't seen that person around, or last time I saw them, they seemed a little off, or I saw them post this on social media. Will you help me check in? Keep that up. That is love and care, and God's purpose in our church is love and care. That's what's driving us, so keep that up. I want to close today with the rest of the story from Psalm 77, because it began in this dark place, right? The psalmist was listing actual symptoms of clinical depression, like I can't sleep, I can't speak, a lot of blaming God and feeling abandoned by God. And then in verse 10, there's this turnaround, and it's kind of a longer psalm, so I'm not going to read all of it, but the turnaround in verse 10 changes from an I to a we. So the psalmist is still really hurting and can't quite see hope, but what they're able to do is remember communal times of hope. So he goes from this place of I am feeling in a complete despair, and then says, but Lord, I do remember when you led us from slavery into freedom. I do remember when you gave us water from a rock, when you gave us manna from heaven. And he's able to kind of dial into that communal memory of hope from times before. And I think that that's something that we can do for others. We can help them dial into that memory of we when they can only see the down of the I. And maybe they can't remember the promise of our faith. Maybe they can't remember or believe that the light shines in the darkness and the darkness cannot overcome it, but we can remember it for them. And as part of a faithful, loving community, that's our job, to hold that shared memory until they can claim it as their own, until they can dial that in as their own. That's part of loving someone through this. We all have someone in our lives who's affected by mental illness. My prayer for all of us today is that we can build our awareness and education to better love them through them. That we may set and hold healthy boundaries in order to keep our own vessels of care full. May we continue to develop our theology and be driven by the care and love of God. And that may you also lean into Jesus' promise. Jesus promises us to come all who are weary, all who are heavy burdened, for he will give you rest.